So, a very good afternoon to one and all present here. And we are about to start our next virtual session, which is on DevOps. So, as you can, look at our slides, we are Women Technicals Nagpur, and I am Achita Sugan, host of today's event. Um So I am currently in my pre-final year, pursuing bachelor's from Ramdev Baba University, and I am the core team member of Women Techmakers Nagpur. So first of all, you must have heard about this community, right? But if you have not heard about it, let me tell you what is Women Techmakers Nagpur. So Women Techmakers Nagpur is Central India's largest women community which works basically on organizing events or giving career opportunities and growth in other fields too. So, as the name suggests, most of y'all will think that this is only for women, but this is not the case. This is open for all. The thing is that the community consists of all the women. So, not taking your much time over here, I would like you to introduce to our ambassadors first of all, Sania Devi, she is software engineer at Persistent, and Neha Devi, so she is software engineer at VCP. And because of them, it is possible that we are going with this series of virtual sessions. So they have contributed a lot to this community, and yeah, we really appreciate the work. Next is WTM opportunities. So this group provides a gateway for all the internships, jobs, and courses, connecting all the women in tech with valuable career enhancing possibilities and growth. So you can scan this QR and get into our WhatsApp group where we share all the opportunities, be it to any specific role or any specific company. So you can join the WhatsApp group. I'll wait for like a minute. Um, yeah. So I'll move ahead. So our speaker for today is none other than Udayendu Kar sir. So he is a senior specialist at BDX.TV and he has been into this domain for like more than 10 years, I guess. And he has a lot of experience with all the global brands as well. So let's welcome Udayendu sir.
Thank you.
Uh, so yeah, let's get into our topic, which is DevOps. Sir, you may continue.
Yeah, sure. So basically, like nowadays, people are quite familiar with this particular term, like DevOps. And if you look into the organization and the structure, a lot of companies have dedicated position for this DevOps. But let us basically try to understand what this DevOps is and what are the roadmap um, to reach into this kind of profiles and what is the basic demand that we have at organization level. So DevOps is basically a culture which combines typically the development and the operations together to streamline the whole deployment and design, deployment, and implementation of infrastructure along with applications smoothly, right? So normally, like if you look into any organizational structure, they have development team, they have quality engineers team, then they used to have the infrastructure team. Those used to take the code from engineering and used to deploy solutions in their infrastructure. And infrastructure can be anything. It can be your private cloud, it can be the public cloud, depending on the requirement they used to normally deploy. But then over the period of time, what we realize, like the amount of tool set that we have versus the core team, its skill plus the amount of work, it's not going with the correct match. So that's the reason certain companies started splitting these particular infrastructure jobs into smaller functionality, so that there will be dedicated focus on those particular area, and people should be able to focus on the right activity. And based on that, they started having and around that time the cloud started boosting across different organizations. So people started having different job roles, like system engineers or infrastructure engineers, then site reliability engineers, and eventually they started having more cloud focused roles like cloud operation engineers. But when we are talking about the cloud operations, it itself consisting of multiple domains in it. Like as a cloud ops, in the initial days, people need to develop the code, they need to deploy it, they need to implement the monitoring for those solutions. Also, somewhat they were responsible for taking care of the platform. So somewhere around 2015, 2016, they started splitting the jobs, and DevOps started getting into the market, and organization preferred to hire dedicated people with DevOps skill set. So that's how this whole DevOps journey basically started at organizational level. And almost 9-10 years back, people started focusing more towards uh, DevOps as a practice as well as a position. Now, if you like to understand more about like what are the capabilities typically DevOps are doing, so right now four different verticals typically organization prefer to have. They prefer to have a DevOps team with them. They prefer to have a site reliability engineering. They prefer to have a um, we call that as platform engineering team. And they also need to have the core engineering team with them. Now, if we look into the work of DevOps, it's basically to understand the development of various products that core engineering teams prefer to develop, and how they can smoothly be delivered into the production engineering, sorry, production platform via some kind of automation framework, so that whole development approach will be much faster. Plus, along with that, the build and release will also be very smoother. And once DevOps will hand over the deployments to the production, it's basically the SRE team, those will take it to the next level. So that's how the whole roadmap of DevOps using automation and CI/CD. So we'll discuss more about CI/CD, I think, in the coming points. So yeah, as I mentioned, in general, so DevOps is basically working closely with the development team and also work with the operation teams. Now, whatever products are coming from the development team, they are trying to make sure they have the required amount of tools within the organization. If not available, then they basically prefer to either write those tools with the help of some kind of open source tools, or at some point of time they prefer to acquire those tools from the market, because there are a lot of vendors available those offer the dedicated DevOps tools. And eventually they basically automate the whole development approach, and basically hand it over to the SRE team for the deployment purpose. If we talk about the roadmap, um, like uh, let's understand this from different perspectives. So if we want to understand the roadmap to get started towards DevOps as a role, then I think the best time is somewhere around when people are in their engineering. And typically, like if anyone is in second year or third year, where they have some basic understanding about system, little bit about networking, storage, and obviously applications, so they can start learning couple of tools and technology in depth, and try to do some kind of hands-on, so that they can simulate and try to create some small solutions. And eventually that small solution is going to give them some amount of insights to understand how that particular solution is actually working on any kind of platform. Not necessarily from the day one they should jump into the cloud and start spending from the credit card. That's typically not required. what they can do within their laptop, they can install some kind of virtualized platform, whether it's using KVM or VMware workstation, or if they have some basic understanding how the Docker and container works, they can just install the Docker and containers, and they can start creating a small development environment within it. Now, once they'll make themselves a little bit more familiar with varieties of tools, then eventually they can start thinking in a little bit of different direction, like how they can start converting some of their code into a container image, and how they can try to deploy it in a particular environment, so that the application that they have developed can go live. And once the application is live, if few people are trying to access it simultaneously, they should start looking into the different aspect of that application, like the overall utilization of system, how much concurrent access that application can have when more number of users are trying to connect to that, how that application is behaving. And from these small things, with some small group of people, they can start learning down the line. And one most important thing I would like to highlight is, like, nowadays, if you look into the DevOps at any location, whether it's physical or virtual, lot of meetups are happening at community level. A lot of activities are going on. So from the day one, it would be nice if people can start coming into those communities, because when they'll come and join those kind of communities, there will be multiple benefits of it. First, you can have good networking, where you can meet the people of different skill sets, from different background, from different organization. And a lot of time these people will come over and start sharing their experience with varieties of development and deployment approach, from where they can definitely get familiar about multiple tools, multiple technology, the way solutions are getting integrated within the platform. And in long run, that's going to give them a lot of benefits. And obviously, as an approach towards the more clarity of towards more clarity of DevOps, they need to understand a set of tools, right, which require time. So it's not like today you will start learning, and after 4 weeks or 6 weeks you are going to be a perfect DevOps engineer. That's not the situation, because in order to develop automation which can run independently on multiple platform, you need to have that level of expertise. So just get started and have some patience, and eventually you will be there. This particular field is definitely going to have a lot of scope. Initially, it started with a single domain. Now you can see, like, there are already 4 different domains part of this particular platform. Now, 3 are very common, like DevOps, SRE, and platform engineering. And if any company is focusing more and more on the public cloud sector, then they also used to have a cloud ops team with them. So typically, there are 4 teams. Now, even though these 4 words like DevOps, SRE, CloudOps, and platform engineering are looking very close, there are some kind of overlapping work they normally prefer to do. But if you look into the actual scope of each field, it's quite different. For an example, like DevOps is more focused on helping developers to build fast, to release fast. Once release is done, it's basically taken over by SRE team. Those are responsible to develop better tools that can be used for the deployment, right? Or can pick up the tools directly from the community, make it more advanced or more better, which basically can be used for the deployment. Then cloud ops team, they are basically responsible for implementation of monitoring, and taking care of the platform is up and running 24 by 7 or not. And at the end, platform team, which is basically responsible for taking care of the complete platform, on top of which these 3 verticals are basically working together. So the scope is quite vast, but one thing you have to remember, like, every day you have to learn something new. Not necessarily outside of the work you have to do it. During your work also, when you will face a problem, don't consider this just like a problem. Assume like, yeah, you have a situation from where you have to recover, plus you have to make sure like in future that the situation should not happen. And if you'll consider the situations like this is definitely going to be very helpful to learn during your day-to-day activity.
Yes, yes. And sir, how is this different from other roles and why is it in so trend?
This is different from other roles because here, in order to make the automation effective, you need to understand both side of the world. Like you need to understand the way developers used to think about the product that they basically develop, plus you need to understand the operation side of it. So you are basically the bridge that's covering the gap between your development and your operations team. And being a skilled person in DevOps, you need to have good understanding on infrastructure, on application, on different automation tools, to make sure like you understand the gap between these two, and then you have to propose a solution which is basically going to solve the problem from both these teams. And that is the reason like the core skill set which is required for DevOps is not that easy, because people can focus full-fledged in development or full-fledged in operations, but to get a blend of mix knowledge, it's a little bit time consuming, because you need to understand a lot of areas, just not the development or not the operations. So that's the reason like a good DevOps architect is quite valuable in any organization if you'll compare to any other individual roles. And that is the prime reason this particular role is with very high demand.
Yes, sir. And are there any prerequisites? Because I am a student and I still feel that like how to get into this domain. So it is sort of difficult for us to understand and get a proper roadmap of it. So are there any prerequisites, any tool that we need to learn before getting into this?
Not just like the prerequisites, but it's good to have a clear understanding of the roadmap where you want to go. So you can consider this like if someone want to get into DevOps, first of all they need to understand little bit about the platform in which they have to automate things, right? If you don't know like bit clearly about the platform, whether it's public cloud or private cloud, then automating things on top of that platform is practically not possible, right? So first, little bit understanding about the platform. Second, you should also understand somewhat the infrastructure, like normally how infrastructure behaves. And when we talk about infrastructure, primarily three things: your compute, how the compute behaves on top of which your virtual machines or containers will run. Second one is networking, how those machines basically communicate with each other, because when you will start automating something, you need to communicate with a lot of functionalities, right? A lot of solutions together. So you need to understand networking also. Then next part is storage. Eventually, it's all about data, and you need to store the data, you need some storage, right? So if you understand these three pieces of infrastructure, then next part is some amount of operating system. Now in market, basically you will get two different flavor, whether it's a Unix flavor or it's a Windows flavor. So Windows in production are typically for in cloud environment use cases are very different. They are not that rapidly used because of the nature of the operating system itself. But you need to have good grip on Linux operating system, whether it could be Debian based flavor or Red Hat based flavor. And once you understood how to control one operating system, then you can take care of both bare metal servers, virtual machines, and containers, because eventually the specs or the size of the OS will differ from each platform to platform. But at the end, the kernel will be fine-tuned version of what the major one is offering, right? And once you finished the platform, then the operating system, next one is application. So these are basically the layers that you need to understand. So your platform is good, now your OS is good, within that you need to install the applications. Now when you need to install the applications, there are varieties of ways to install it. Certain organizations prefer to have the normal zip file based deployment approach. Certain organizations, they prefer to have the binary based deployment approach. So you need to make yourself little bit familiar with the operating system and how the basically binary and other executions happen in terms of packages within those operating systems. Okay, and then a little bit about the way the application behaves, the way application tries to communicate with each other, because always it's not going to be a single application which will be deployed within the operating system, right? You need to have at least 3 or 4 applications to work together in order to form a solution. Now before forming that solution, it's pretty much required to understand how the whole communication is happening between application to application. Now once you finish that application layer, then the fourth layer is, okay, you understand all these three. Now fourth is not a layer but an different pillar which will basically try to control all these three sections, right? And when you are talking about that, it's basically this set of tools using which you can, automate the manual stuff of each layer. And that's where the core DevOps skills or expertise will help along with certain tools. So depending on the layer, you have to choose the tool, and based on those tools, you have to write the automation.
So, sir, as you mentioned that each company has its own way of deployment. So, according to that, do we need to learn the prerequisites?
Not necessarily, because for an example, like if we'll talk about a single programming language, let's say Java, the way let's say Google is developing applications using Java. It may not be the exact similar way Microsoft is doing, right? Or may not be the exact similar way Oracle is doing. So you are learning Java. You don't need to learn how the organization is working, because when you will join the organization, you have to follow that pattern, right? So try to learn things in general, so that wherever you will get in, you can adopt things accordingly. So try to be more generic instead, getting into the org specific, because if they are using these tools, you have the basic knowledge. Now to adopt it as per their environment, you hardly need a week or two, right?
Sure, sure. Yes, sir. True. Uh, sir, these days, everyone wants to learn anything in order to showcase anything into their resume. I am like, I'll be sitting for placements next year. So I want to learn a thing where I can show some valuable projects into my resume. So, sir, according to you, what are some suggested valuable projects?
um, I'll suggest there is no specific valuable project to this particular domain. But once you will start learning these set of tools, then eventually if you'll start searching in GitHub, you can find out a varieties of DevOps projects. So how you will choose which one is going to be beneficial for you, right? And as we mentioned, like everything is basically layered. So in the beginning phase, try to pick a project which is having very less amount of tools associated with it, so that you will not get confused too much. Pick something with basically like 1 or 2 tool, and then try to do the integration between them, try to write some kind of automation, and make sure whatever you are starting, you are reaching to the finish line. And if you finished first tool with, let's say, first DevOps project with basically two tools or 3 tools, then you are kind of good to get started. Now then start looking for the next level, and in the next level it would be very beneficial if you'll try to start looking for some enhancement along with your first project. So that what it will do, it will help you to understand in real time when you are implementing some project, those projects will not be scrapped completely and the company will start jumping into another product, right? So those projects will be eventually expanded in different fashion. So whatever you developed in the phase one, try to pick something on top of that existing project and add some more tools and develop some meaningful content out of it, and try to cover 4 or 5 projects around it. And when you are working on DevOps, make sure like you are covering complete cycle, like you are trying to build something, you are trying to deploy something, you are trying to implement small amount of monitoring to it, and at the end you are getting the alerts and able to see some kind of reports how your systems are behaving in real time. You may not need to touch all these things on your own. There might be dedicated team, there might be dedicated business unit to do all this stuff. But as a in the learning phase, as an individual, if you're trying to cover all this, these things are going to give you a lot of good knowledge, and by that means you will interact with a lot of people of our community. You will interact with a lot of tools. You have to go into different sites to understand the content, the design aspect of it, right? So that you can make yourself familiar with searching, learning and implementation process of it. Plus you will eventually start getting more familiar with open source tool and how to basically use them to get some to create some meaningful project out of it, right? So that's how I feel like the approach should be.
And sir, as you are more familiar with this domain, which approach do you think would be best for learning? Like practical learning would be good, or we should first watch tutorials and then implement something that is good.
In the initial phase, I'll suggest spend some time to learn those tools and understand it a little bit. Then you should start doing the hands-on based approach, because just learning is not going to make you a skilled engineer, right? So if you want to learn something via the hands-on approach, that's going to create a lot of problems, because sometime when you will try to execute certain command, it may not work correctly as per the documentation. It could be because of multiple reasons. So when you will try to solve one problem, eventually you will realize you have come across a distance where you have been through a lot of different small challenges, and you know now how to overcome them. So from the day one, don't immediately jump into the practical based approach. That's not the right way. You get some basic understanding of the product, tools, or the environment, then try to follow the try to follow a practical approach, so that you should be able to complete your work on time, plus you will be a bit more productive. And practical approach is required, because just by watching YouTube videos or any tutorials is not going to make you very skilled. So you need the hands-on for sure.
Sure, sir. Uh, so, while I was posting a lot of posts about our event on social media, there were a lot of people who were asking me what is CI/CD.
Okay.
Because I also told them that we were also covering this topic called as CI/CD. So first, please tell us what is CI/CD.
Okay, so as you can see between this CI/CD there is a slash, right? That means it's not a single word. It's the combination of 2 words. So let us
Yes.
start from there itself, right? So CI basically stands for continuous integration, and CD stands for continuous deployment. Now let's try to understand what this continuous integration is. So assume you are a developer, okay, and you are developing a product called product X. So you have a code repo, and normally the approach is, so let's say you are a Java developer. So every time you are writing a piece of code, you are compiling that code, then you are running it in a particular environment to make the connectivity to database, then trying to visualize things in the UI, right? So this is the whole work normally the developers tries to do day in day out. But the challenge is like if every time, so if you are starting with a small project, the code might look very simple and very straightforward. But when you will start working on an enterprise level code, the approach is going to be very different because usually people prefer to have a very modular code. That means one whole application is going to split into a lot of small code sets, right? And in order to make them working, you have to make sure the integration between those codes are literally good. Now with that in assumption, when you are focusing on continuous integration part, what you have to do, let's say you have a code repo, you developed some code, you checked out. Now when you will do the code checkout, so there are multiple ways to deal with it. The best what normally companies prefer to do, if let's say you are working on a code, usually you will work it in a feature branch or bug fix branch, right? Or in a custom issue branch. And from there when the code will go, so usually the whole code repo supposed to structure in three different stages. First one is the main repo or the master branch. I mean, the whole repo is basically split into three different sections. Top is master branch, from where code supposed to go directly to the production. Second one is the develop branch, and in the develop branch, normally what people prefer to do, whatever code they write, so they used to keep it in their own private branch. So from there, they're supposed to create with some minimal testing. Obviously, they're supposed to create a pull request to develop branch, and when code will go to develop branch, depending on the code and its surrounding and the build approach, they basically need to pull the code, compile it, and make sure the code is usable. Now if they figure it out in the develop branch itself whether the code is usable or not, then they can take the best decision out of it. So assume the code is usable, that means the code is ready for production. So what they will do, from the develop branch, then they will create a pull request to go to the master branch, and one code will reach to the master branch. Depending on what kind of pipelines people have configured, if it is commit based, that means when code will be committed from a development branch to master branch, automatically a webhook will be triggered. Those things I'll show you a little bit at the end of the presentation, so that you guys can have some basic idea how these webhooks and other things are working. So what it will do, based on that event, a webhook will be triggered, and that webhook will talk to your continuous integration pipeline, whether it's through Jenkins or some other tools, and it will download that complete code repo with latest commit in it. Then it will follow the build process approach that normally you guys will have. Okay, and eventually the build will be ready. That's basically we call as continuous integration. Now once the build is ready, it's basically ready for the deployment. Now deployment approach again vary from organization to organization, product to product. Certain organizations prefer to have directly CI/CD integrated, so that once build is ready, it's supposed to get deployed in a dev setup with where some dummy customers has to test it, and based on the test they need to figure out certain result, and they'll decide whether the deployment will go for production or not. Certain customers directly deploy this in production to a small set of customers, and then they try to understand the impact of it. If this is not going to have a any kind, not going to have any kind of side effect, then they prefer to roll it out across the platform, right? So that's how basically continuous deployment works. But for continuous deployment nowadays there are a lot of options. A lot of applications are containerized. You must have heard about words called Docker and Docker containers, Kubernetes, right? So depending on platform, these applications will go to those platforms directly. Certain applications they are still on virtual machines. So depending on the deployment process and the tools, a company need to figure out like how they want to deploy them in their virtual machines directly. And certain applications, if they have a requirement to stick to the underlying bare metal directly, then they'll go to the bare metal servers. So yeah, depending on the requirement, this is how it will be. But in general, if we'll look, this CI/CD is basically covering everything, starting from code development to code compilation, creating the build, pushing that build to certain location to store it for future purpose, and then eventually deploying it in the production environment. The whole cycle typically known as CI/CD. So CI/CD, we talk about CI/CD, but always CI/CD is not 100% in production environment, because every company has their own deployment approach, deployment cycle, release cycle, right? So depending on the release cycle, they control the CD part, but CI is mostly can be 100% automated, and it's good to have this under automation. It will add a lot of value.
So moving on to the next topic, we just wanted an example of how CI/CD works in like a little bit example of a real life so that we can connect because there were a lot of terms which were very new for all of us.
Okay. So let's assume like big billion day is coming, right? And different platforms like Amazon, Flipkart, they release a lot of products specifically for this big billion days, right? So what they'll do, if something is specifically for a particular span of time, then quickly before the release cycle, they can prepare the product, and the product might have links to a lot of new solutions in terms of images, in terms of their pricing, their location, their shipping times, right? So depending on this, they will prepare to develop the code, and once code is ready, they'll basically pass it to a CI tool, which will take that code, compile it, and make it ready. And initially they'll deploy it on a particular platform, and eventually they'll push this into production. But normally, if you want to understand this in terms of tools, assume like Amazon is using their own cloud platform for deploying all solutions, right? And assume like they are deploying these solutions in the EC2 machines, right? So the whole flow should be, they have their internal code repo, developers develop the code, commit it. Assume like they're using GitHub. Okay, just one example. So what they did, they have multiple branch, they follow the branching strategy. They'll develop the code, they'll push it to the specific branch, and from that branch, based on a webhook trigger, one trigger will go, and it will initiate a build. And once that build is ready, they will basically create a small container image out of it. And once the container image is ready, if it's 100% automated, then that image will be basically downloaded to the production box and get deployed. If it is not 100% automation, if some kind of manual approval is required, then once build is ready, some kind of email notification or Teams notification, Slack notification will go to the specific team, whoever is responsible for the deployment, whether it's whether it's SRE team or cloud ops team or directly platform engineering team. It will basically go there, and once those team got notified, whoever is the person in shift responsible for the deployment, they'll trigger the deployment, and basically this will go to production. So once things got deployed in production, if you'll go to, let's say, amazon.com, or amazon.in, in the website, you can start seeing those changes directly, right? So and once that day is gone, new build will come, which will scrap the old content, old structure, and it will push it to the old version.
Yeah, that was pretty much understandable.
And the best approach is, a lot of time, things may not go as per the plan, and teams need to roll back certain things. So that's the reason certain versioning, certain tagging, those approaches are very very important. And usually like every organization usually prefer to follow that. So at the end, when I'll show you some code base and some basic structure, we can discuss more about it.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, sir. So are there any learning resources for us?
I mean, learning resources, typically I'll prefer whatever product you want to learn. go to its upstream documentation, and you can't figure out the better document than that one. Second part is, nowadays like people prefer to learn a lot of things online, so there are a lot of paid sites available, there are a lot of free sites available. And typically if you'll go to YouTube, you can learn a lot of things, a lot of gurus are available these days online, and providing courses on different areas. So pretty much just go to YouTube, search whatever you would like to learn, and you can continue with the learning process. So everything is there online, you just need to figure out the right way how you can start learning.
Yeah, yeah. We are here to how to create a pipeline and what is a pipeline.
Okay. So normal, like this is not something just like gas pipeline or something. It's
Yeah,
basically more related to how this whole software CI/CD is basically going to work. So as mentioned earlier, like this whole development process is split into different part: continuous integration and continuous deployment. And in continuous integration, basically we call that the integration pipeline. In continuous deployment, we call that deployment pipeline. So each pipeline has its own approach and own way of doing things. So uh, the practical approach will be like, depending on tool set, how you are going to use it. So I think we'll prefer to have a small demo just to show the integration of continuous integration pipeline, how this can be done between your GitHub and a continuous integration tool called Jenkins. We'll see that little later. Expected salary. That's really interesting because um, there is no fixed amount that I can tell you. This always vary depending on a lot of factors, and the most important one is the organization in which you are going to work, plus the amount of experience you are carrying with you, plus the amount of complexity that the organization is having that you are trying to solve, right? So everything is mostly around these three factors. And normally if you look into a market, the word DevOps is quite familiar, but a lot of people consider this in a very different way. For an example, certain organization expects the DevOps guys to be just like brilliant developers, which is practically always not the case, right? Because they come up with different mindset, different strategy, different skill sets. Um, for certain organizations, they expect SREs to be extremely good. SRE is definitely a different expertise and skill set close to developers, because they develop tools. Those will be basically used by cloud ops and platform engineering to take care of the application and platforms. So depending on the experience, the complexity we are trying to solve, and the organizations, these things will change. So in general, like if you'll go to different sites like Glassdoor or something, if you'll search against organizations, if you'll start looking into the salaries they're offering, the benefits they're offering, it's quite fantastic for individuals to get those money. But yeah, it will vary. But nowadays in the beginning level also, if people have good amount of skill sets, I have personally seen getting them good package, because time to time I guide a lot of candidates. Those are in engineering colleges, or just trying to pass out, they're in the final year, or they're trying to do some kind of project as a part of some community engagement we do. And eventually we have seen like a lot of good companies are respecting knowledge, the skill sets people are trying to bring in, and that's going to add a lot of value when it comes to the number of salary.
yeah, yes. So again, what is the estimated salary? Because we are very curious to know.
You can expect somewhere close to like a developer's salary. For an example, like I have seen a lot of startups are offering somewhere between 3.5 to 5 lakhs in the beginning level. Certain organizations do offer somewhere around 7.5, and if you have really good skills, between 1 to 3 years, you can get close to 10 to 15 lakhs. I mean, it's not that bad.
All right. So I guess we are, yes, sir. So we are end of all the questions.
Okay. So yeah, as we are coming closer, so let's quickly show something like in terms of CI/CD pipeline. What are the critical things and how the whole approach is basically working, right? So let me start sharing my screen.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So I hope you guys can see my screen, right? Is it visible?
Yeah, yeah. Yes, sir. It is.
Quickly, let me check if these applications are running or not. Okay, applications are running. So basically, I'm just trying to show like assume you have two different services, and you want to create one continuous integration between them. So typically, the most popular continuous integration tool is Jenkins, and it's having a lot of hooks or integration with a wide range of tools in the ecosystem. And the most interesting approach of using Jenkins with any kind of code management platform, just like GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket, is via certain webhooks. For an example, this is a private repo that I deployed um, for this particular demo. So let me see. So this is a GitHub repo, just like GitHub.com, but I deployed it in my test machine, where this whole repo is basically available. And what I did, I just created a small repo, and within that repo, assume like you have a lot of code practically available in this particular repo. So what you are doing, assume like this is a code file, and what you want to do, you want to do a code change. So let's say you just added a new code, let's say like fifth line, and you did a code commit. So maybe you can just put a code commit message like updated the readme, and if you would like to add anything additional, you can do it. And first of all, like, I'm just trying to show this to you guys in the main branch, but that is really the bad approach. So typically, people prefer to have multiple branches. For example, in branch, you can see we just have the main branch or master branch. But similarly, if you'd like to have multiple branch, you can basically go ahead and create them, push the code to a particular branch, and then from there you can try to create different pull request to move the code from one branch to another, like that. Okay. So normally what happens, let's say within your code repo you have some code available and you would like to move them from one branch to another. So this kind of icon you can see, so basically this is to create a pull request. So what will happen when you create a pull request, this pull request is basically between your source repo or source branch and a target branch. So right now in my case, I have just main branch, because of which you can see a single branch name. But if you have multiple branch, then practically you can try to uh, you know deploy it in different branch. Let me see if I can make a quick one. So I just clone this branch, and as you can see, right now I'm inside main branch. But it's not a good practice to touch this main branch or master branch, because as I mentioned, that branch is specifically to be in sync with your production. So what you can do, you can quickly just check out to a branch called, let's say, develop. And usually touching develop is also not a good idea, but here just for testing I'm just showing this. So in develop, let's say touch data.py, then let's say put something inside it. Input os let's say slash var slash tmp slash data. Assume like this is a small Python file which will do my stuff. So git status, git add, commit, data.py. So it's always good to have your identity along with the code, because this will help to identify who has written the code, and if anything goes wrong you can easily track those. Okay, git commit, then git push. So there is right now, as you can see, there is no branch available here called develop. So we are just trying to push it for the first time. So you have to push it git push set upstream, so that it will create that branch and then it will push our code. Oh, what I did, I didn't remember the credentials. Nice, thank God. So as you can see, I created a branch called develop. Let me refresh, and you can see now I have code available inside develop, and this is the new branch I did. Now assume like this develop branch is also available, because typically from develop people will prefer to create the different uh, you know uh, test pipelines to do the continuous integration to fine tune your code and create the build, the development build. And once those are ready, it should go to the master. So we have two branches. Let's make another one. Git checkout minus b, let's say issue 100. Okay, now git branch. So I am inside branch issue 100. So this is the branch in which this is my branch, and I supposed to develop the code inside this. So let's say I have two files here. What I will do, uh, so let me add one line here, the interpreter that I supposed to use to compile this code. Okay, now if you look into git status, I have some change. So what I want to do, git add commit, then git push. So at the time of git push, I have to make sure I'm pushing it here. So this is how typically like you will do the development in the in your favorite editor. And once your code is ready, if you'll go to the code repo, basically you can see you have the codes available everywhere. Now if you look, this is the new change we did, right? We added the interpreter, and the same change is not available in your top level code repo. So what you have to do, you have to create a pull request so that the code will be updated between your current repo to the develop one. So from here, if we'll basically try to create a, okay, so this is the final one where it will go. So this is your source branch 100, and this is your destination branch develop, and you can see there is a small repo. So basically you have to create a pull request, and it's always good you can put some comment about this pull request and add a reviewer. So what that will do, that will basically help that will basically help you to make sure your codes are looking good, clean, and no basic mistakes are available. So you can create the pull request. Now if we'll go here, you can see this file has been changed, and typically at project level you can see one pull request is available now. So you can whoever is a person, if that person is having rights to review and merge, basically they will be notified. They can see this pull request, they can see the number of commits that particular code is having, who is the author, and what all files has been changed, and what are the contents, right? So this is the commit. Let's say I'll just try to merge this commit, and the code has been merged now. And if we'll go to the develop branch, then you can see this file has been updated 2 minutes back, and right now in my develop branch I already have the code. Now usually from this develop branch itself, people prefer to have the pipeline so that they can have the complete build repo, and once that is done, they will basically merge it to master or main branch. So let me just try to merge it to main from develop, and I can see a lot of code to merge. So I'll create a pull request. Okay, now in the master, I have my new code with complete details available. Now, this is the total number of commits you can see. Now, usually what happens, they have to create a release tag. For an example, here you can see two things, right? One is branch, one is tag. So by default, branch is selected. That's the reason you can see all the branch. If you click on tags, so earlier, like for testing, I was creating all these tags. That's the reason you can see it. But in general, like, yeah, you have to create a release tag. So here what we'll do, let's say we would like to create a new release out of this. So you can see this release tab at the top. If you have right permission to create this release tag, so you should be able to see this release button at the top. Then you can put some name, like let's say version 1 dot, or maybe like 1.1.0. And always remember, it's always good to have the release that's got created from the main branch, because when you will follow the development and testing approach, people always prefer to merge the fine-tuned non-buggy code to master. And those, when the code will reach to master, basically those codes are completely tested and supposed to work perfectly in production. So you can just put some comment like, let's say, releasing version this, something like that. Okay, and if you like to put the release descriptions, like what all bugs, what all stuff you have fixed, you can put a nice write up here, and then eventually you can publish it. So if you look, this is the tag. Okay, and this tag supposed to be used for the complete pipeline. So what will happen in case of GitHub or any code repo, they have an option called webhooks. And basically in webhooks, so you can see this webhooks link, right? So in case of webhooks, they can add webhook to a particular platform, and which is basically responsible for continuous integration. And in that webhook, they have to define certain thing. For an example, here for testing, I have already integrated this one. So let's see what this webhook supposed to do. So you guys can see this link, right? And this link is showing it's having a endpoint called generic trigger webhook, inside which it's trying to invoke something, and I have passed a token called CICD. So what all these things are and how they're supposed to work, let us try to understand. So first, let me copy this URL and hit in the browser and see what this is offering me. Okay, so this is the link to my Jenkins. So in my Jenkins, I have created one particular pipeline, and that pipeline supposed to have a generic webhook trigger. So let me delete this one so that we can try to configure this as well. So yeah, so this is the link to my Jenkins, and basically what your webhook will do, this webhook will use some method to send data. So as you're planning to send data, so we'll use post. So this is the a typical approach how REST APIs work, and your JSON will be in a typical post structure content type, which is application slash JSON, because we'll send some JSON data. And what we want, if you want to use any secret for the communication, you can use it, otherwise simply ignore it. So there are multiple ways to trigger the job, so when the code will go. One is via push event, one is by default via all event, one is typically on a particular event. For an example, if you are working at repository level, let's say whenever uh, uh, whenever there will be a release, you would like to trigger the job. So you can just enable this release one, which means whenever there will be a release from this particular code repo, it will pass the payload or the instruction to the Jenkins, and Jenkins will try to trigger the job. Okay. Now let's assume like we are trying to do this via release tag based, so you can enable the release tag. Then for branch, branch filter, let's say you would like to whitelist anything, you can whitelist that. uh, or any kind of specific activity you would like to uh, notify, you can directly notify. So let's say we have a branch called main, and we would like to trigger something related to this. Now authorization header, so when let's say you would like to have token based authorization, you can have token based authorization, you can just need to pass this. And then basically you have to information about trigger events will be sent to the webhook. Yeah, so you have to basically activate this webhook, so you can just click on update, right? So this webhook is responsible for doing the interaction with the Jenkins. Now we created the webhooks, so these are the different payloads that we have uh, we can see what is basically going to the Jenkins server. So for an example, if you look here, there are two type of things that we are trying to do. One, we are sending some requests, so this is the request header details that we are trying to do. Second, we are getting some response. So let's try to look as a request what all things we are sending and where we are sending. So this is the location where we are trying to send the details. Okay. And didn't specify with any job with any trigger. The token was supplied. Message jobs are null. Didn't find any jobs with generic trigger configured. Okay, because we do not have any pipeline, so this job actually failed. We'll see this part now. This is basically trying to send to the Jenkins via a post approach. Now, what all things it's trying to do? Assuming like what we did, we created a release called 1.1.0 from main branch. Then we put the comment like releasing minus version 1.1.0, and these are certain URLs for the code and other stuff, and the person, the dummy URL, all these things, let's say we used. And this is the name of the repo, this is the full path to the repo. So this is known as the payload, which basically offered by your code repo management system. And as a response, it also need to get something. For an example, DevOps build system. So earlier that pipeline was there that I removed. So it went to the DevOps build pipeline system. Then it was trying to filter the code with version name, and it didn't found something in the correct way, and eventually it just uh, returned trigger false. So this trigger false is basically responsible to uh, give you some indication whether the pipeline got triggered or not. So now let's understand how we will configure this pipeline with this info here. So let's go ahead and create a pipeline here. So it should be like release based CI/CD. Okay. So there are multiple options available in Jenkins. Like you can create a freestyle, you can create a pipeline structure, or you can create multi-branch. You can create dedicated folder, and you can put pipelines in it. So if you learn Jenkins in details, you can come to know about the use cases of all these sections. So right now we are more focused on creating the basic pipeline. So what you can do, you can create the pipeline, click OK, and these are the sections based on which we're supposed to create the pipeline. So we are going to have everything in this generic webhook trigger. So first of all, by default, when you will install Jenkins, this generic webhook trigger won't be there in the system. So for that, what you have to do, if you'll go to manage Jenkins, and if you'll go to plugins, and if you'll go to available plugins, or like in my case installed plugins, because I installed this today. So if you'll search here, let's say generic generic plugin, you can see, yeah, I have just installed this today. And every plugins have their link from where they basically take care a lot of stuffs. So this is what we have defined in case of our uh, you know um, pipeline. And this generic webhook has to be installed. If you like to disable it, you can disable it. If you like to enable it, you can enable it. It's up to you. Okay. And if the webhook is there, it was not working. So let's see, like let's assume like I want to delete it. So okay, then let's say I would like to restart my Jenkins. So this was not working. So I thought, let's go ahead and test it. Okay. So I just removed that. And let's say you would like to install a plugin. So how we will do it? So assume this is the one you would like to install. So select the plugin, generic webhook trigger, and click on install. Now you can enable the Jenkins restart. So sometimes it's good to restart the Jenkins, because certain plugins actually work properly after the restart only. Okay. Uh, Now we have plugins ready. So we have to configure this one. So basically, this is the pipeline. Now we have to make sure this generic trigger is available, so you can enable this. And if you'll enable this, uh, here if you look, we have passed a token. So this token is going to identify. So let's say you have 10 pipelines, right? How you will identify which pipeline it should trigger? So every pipeline should invoke one particular token, and based on that token ID, whatever ID will give, it will try to recognize the um, pipeline that it's supposed to trigger, and it's basically going to trigger it. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just pass this token, and apart from that everything else is generic. So I have created a custom code, so we'll just try to use that. So basically you can write down your own uh, pipeline to understand what this is going to do. So here basically what it is going to do, it's going to pick any agent, and what it will do, it will just going to use the generic trigger one to understand if it's going to have this CI/CD token. It will try to identify the tag name from this release one. So if you look into the payload that we checked last time, here, so this release is a JSON. Inside this, there is something called tag name, and if this tag name will start from small v, then it should allow the build. Okay, so this is what the whole logic we have written. So accordingly, like we are just trying to filter. It should start with v to identify the version. Okay, and if this is true, it will just print something. I'm not going to build anything right now, else it will just bypass it. So we'll just save. And there are two ways to load this on Jenkins directly. First one is, we know this is trigger based, so if you click on build, first build will fail, or it will be a false build, but it will compile the complete code. So if you go to the console output, you can see admin user who is logged in here has basically triggered this one, and this is just a basic pipeline. But if we'll go to configure now, you can see as this code compilation has done, certain things has been populated in the pipeline, and when you will try to build them, they will be loaded. um, so now pipeline is ready. Let us try to create a build out of this main. So let me try to put something here. So I'm in ISO 100. So let me put something. Let's assume this is the version we are going to release. Okay. Connection interrupted. Okay, so commit has gone. If you'll check git log, you can see this is the last commit we did, and That's what we have in our file. So let's create a pull request from this one to develop. Okay, merged. Let's create another pull request from develop to master. This is the commit we are going to have. Let's create a build with this one. So you can see right now this is what we have, the latest one, and we have to create a tag out of it. So let's go ahead and create a tag, and we are going to create it from the main branch. Okay, and publish, and if we are lucky we can see this in webhook. Okay, just now you can see this got triggered. If you'll open here you can see, yes, this passed this tag. Then in response you can see release best CI/CD and triggered true. Okay, triggered true means this two. So you can see this generic pipeline has been triggered, and it has been through this one. So yeah, so you can see this pipeline has been triggered via CI/CD, and based on this webhook, or you can see it was able to trigger this pipeline successfully. And here we are able to uh, see this particular pipeline got triggered, right? So this is how typically the CI/CD pipeline works. This is a very basic dummy one, right? But in general, if you need to perform any action, you can just write down the action, and when you will create a build from the code repo, the CI pipeline will be triggered, and it's supposed to download the code, compile it, put it to your build machine, and run some basic test, generate the reports. It will send those reports via email, and at the end basically you can see those those outcomes are looking nice. And if that is true, then you can release that code, and eventually your code is going to be ready for production. So this is the whole CI approach that we did. CD approach also can be in the similar way via different pipelines with different approach. So yeah, now I'm just going to stop my screen. All right.
Yeah, so thank you so much, everyone, for joining this session. And I hope that you follow our YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. And do follow Udayati sir's LinkedIn and Twitter as well. So, are there any doubts further? Uh, I guess there are no doubts. Yeah. So we'll wrap up this session. Thank you so much, sir, for taking this session and giving us a deep insight of what DevOps is. And it was really good session. Like we also got to know more about CI/CD. And I guess this topic is no more way further. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.